Hi Hinsters, welcome back to the channel, and if you're new, welcome too. I hope you're keeping safe and well. Happy Cancer season, and do of course subscribe to my channel if you like what I do. Give this video a thumbs up too, and leave me a comment below to tell me where you have Saturn in your birth chart, because we are of course continuing my mini series on Saturn through the birth chart. You do of course need to know your rising sign to therefore know which house you have Saturn in and which two houses Saturn rules for you, because Saturn in traditional astrology rules both the houses where you have Capricorn and Aquarius. So look out for that too and let me know. So we looked at parts or houses 1 to 5 in part 1. And now, yes, we are going to finish with houses 6 to 12. Sorry that I could not put this into one, because I did have to do some traveling up north to see some family, and it was wonderful, and I just got back. So this one is a bit slapdash, and I'm going to be reading from my phone, my notes for you. But yeah, I hope you're all keeping safe and well. And we will start then with Saturn in the 6th house. So if you have this placement, you have Saturn in the house of bad fortune, quote unquote. We have here excellent managers, supervisors, hirers as well, people who are able to hire, puppeteer, control, delegate people very well. We have challenges relating to Saturnian health or Saturnian health challenges that can relate to things like the joints or the skin or the teeth, or maybe even you work in some realm of health or treatment that or therapy that pertains to those body parts or some Saturnian body part. Also, you may be very serious about career and your calling, your path, and you can be a kind of slow climber or a slow cougar type of person when it comes to something 6th house. This is because the 6th house actually makes a trine to the career house or the calling house, which is the 10th house. So even though it's the house of bad fortune, it is actually considered a little bit better than the house of bad spirit, which is the 12th house, and we'll get to that house at the end. Also, you may be with this placement bitter about bad fortune. Oh, I should have said this at the beginning, by the way, but disclaimer. Of course, not everything I say about your particular placement will pertain to you. We're talking about the expressions of a god in our chart, and so it may just be one or two of the expressions that relate to you. And of course, check which sign you have Saturn in and the condition of Saturn, like is it being opposed by anything, is it conjunct any other planets in your chart, and so on and so forth. Now also, you could be the type to suffer in silence, because the 6th house is the house of suffering, and Saturn is very well known for keeping things more stum or being more melancholic or self-ostracizing about things. So when it comes to suffering, you may just want to suffer in silence or be the type who suffers in silence, and also kind of a covering up the cracks type of person. As I mentioned at the beginning of the first part of this series, Cancer, why am I wanting to talk about Cancer all of a sudden? By the way, Saturn falls in the sign of Cancer. So if you have Saturn in Cancer in the 6th house, that could be quite challenging. But yes, covering up the cracks. I mentioned at the beginning of the first part of this series, yes, that Saturn is the ruler of feigned appearances or faking things, and to have Saturn in the 6th house could be someone who covers up the cracks of their life or their problems and kind of has this facade that nothing is wrong or nothing is going on, when underneath something is going on perhaps, or they could just be quite, they could have this chronic problem where they are obsessed with or very focused on appearing as if there's no problems or no bad fortune. Also, you could be similarly like a hypochondriac type of person or a worry wart with Saturn in the sixth house. You could, when it comes to the father, because Saturn is very often associated, of course, with fathers, you could have a father who in your life is somehow unfortunate or carries bad fortune or is somehow sick, or chronic sickness or suffering. The father can also be a big boss, Saturnian type in that sense, can be an employer, a supervisor of some sort. And for the native with sixth house Saturn placement, there can be depression, there can be mental health challenges. This person can also be kind of similar to the points I mentioned earlier, but like slow to seek help or reluctant also to take action. This can also be someone, if you do have employees or people you're in charge of, maybe you're a team leader, you can kind of wrap your employees or your people in cotton wool. Saturn is kind of like the worrywart father type or the avaricious father even. So you could be protective or overly protective of your employees or people you're in charge of. Finally, Saturn in the sixth house can give a handler of work animals, because the sixth house does pertain to work animals. Saturn in the seventh house, then, this can be the father opposing you in some sense in your life. Also, your partners are like parents or fathers in some sense. So, yes, this can for some people bring daddy issues with Saturn in the seventh house. Also, Saturn in the seventh can bring skeptical opponents or long-term nemesis, or someone who's just very easily opposed to people, or very abrasive, very oppositional, very polarizing type of person. There can also, for Saturn in the seventh house, be commitments delayed with people, or marriage being delayed, or business partnerships being delayed, or being more trying, being more trifling, being more hard going, and also challenges with marriage when marriages are had. It doesn't mean that marriage cannot be had, by the way, but it can have this sense of marriage is very delayed, or maybe the native has more than one marriage or more than one long-term relationship before they eventually settle or get there. Now, Saturn in the seventh house can make partners fake somehow, or they can feign appearances somehow. Partners can also be your boss, or they can just be bosses in general. Or partners are somehow Saturnian, maybe they are really hard workers. And the partners can also be restrictive, they can be conservative, they can be pessimistic, realistic, harsh, or mean in some way. Partners can be the types to commit long term, whether that's to you or just to things or some kind of project or work in life, and they can be very serious about relationships. Partners can be business partners as well, and also like collaborators, and they can be the type to work hard, or people that you collaborate with are very hard workers, are great delegators, and have eminence. So you might, pair up with very eminent people. And finally, Saturn in the seventh house can bring nighttime activities by the water, or someone who enjoys that type of thing. Okay, Saturn in the eighth house. Here we have great inheritances. We have sometimes for some people difficulty gaining inheritances or returns, because we've got Saturn in the eighth house, which is the house of things coming back to you. So yeah, harder going returns, difficulty getting those returns, or slower returns. You could also be a manager of other people's resources or data. The father of the native with Saturn in the eighth house can be connected to the partner's assets somehow. So that's an interesting expression. The father can also be a therapist, psychologist, mentor, or advisor in terms of their literal job, or they could just have these energies about them. Also, there may be serious concerns about the future for you with Saturn in the 8th house, because the 8th house is associated with anxieties about the future, and we're putting a malefic in this house, and we're putting Saturn specifically in this house. So you can see how anxiety about the future can be more increased when we have this placement. Also, you could be more idle, more melancholic, more of a depressive type. Your income could be more restricted somehow, or at some point, or chronically, and the father could have a hold on your income somehow. This is giving me like Britney Spears vibes. The partner also can have troubles with money. The partner could have like Saturnian health issues or baggage. Maybe you are like secretly depressed, or you have some daddy issues as well, similar to, or the partner rather has daddy issues, similar to Saturn in the 7th house. Also, you could have some secret or mysterious Saturnian health issue, like a cough or something that is chronic or like undiagnosed or unexplained, and so on. Saturn in the 8th house can also bring punishments for bad investments, or like if you do things that are bad deliberately, the kind of punishment is worse. Yeah. Or you always get caught doing things, or get caught when you're doing bad things, or you have bad intentions. Okay, Saturn in the 9th house. This is quite a quick one, really. Basically, I think Saturn in the 9th house gives a lot of realism, gives the native some cynicism, doubt, skepticism, negative outlooks, because this is the 9th house, the house of the higher education, the higher view, the what I call the right way. It is the house of faith and spirituality and religion and purposeful travel and voyages, pilgrimages. And it can give a very negative outlook for some people with this placement, or a melancholic world view, or there could be something more Saturnian about the way that they teach as well, the way that they project their faith, their beliefs. So if you are someone in the church, for example, you could be more of the stern or serious, what's the word, self-flagellating type. The father as well could be literally a teacher of some sort, a guide, or a religious figure. Again, literally, the father could be in a church, for example. The father can also travel a lot, having Saturn in the 9th house, and travel itself abroad or very far away, or purposeful travel could be delayed or hard going when we have a native malefic 9th house placement. And also pilgrimages can be more serious. So you're taking on more serious pilgrimages or travel abroad, or you're just more serious about these things of going far on some trip for some, maybe some deeply held purpose, maybe some secretive purpose, or maybe for some melancholic reason as well, you are going abroad. But it has like, anyway, even though it could be melancholic or sad or whatever, it has still something deep and meaningful for you, and that is why you are doing it. All right, Saturn in the 10th house. This is like the father being well known for something, or maybe your father is put on some kind of pedestal. The father could be very active. I'm getting right now like father is like a speech giver for some people, or a presenter of some sort. Father, yes, very active as well, because this is the 10th house, which is an angular house, and it is the house of praxis, or the house of big actions, big decisions, big changes as well. So, and we're putting Saturn here, which is often associated with fathers or like paternal types in your life. This, in terms of the career, your career can mean that your career is more slow cooked, or you're more of a slow cooker, slow climber when it comes to your career. You could be more serious and careful about your calling, and you could be a very reputation focused type of person. Maybe your Instagram or your LinkedIn is very regularly updated, or you care a lot about it. But on the opposite side, you could be very reserved and conservative about your social media. Maybe you only have like one Instagram picture and it's like your family, something like that. Also, the career or the calling itself with Saturn in the 10th house could be somehow Saturnian. So maybe you are an actual boss, or you are a craft type of person, or you're renowned for some sort of craft, because Saturn does rule as well certain crafts like woodwork, literally leadwork, stonework, sculpting, or like stone sculpting. And Saturn also gives judges a lot of the time, including in the 10th house. We could get a judge or someone who's renowned for or gets some big position or opportunity to be a judge of some sort, and so on. Also, with Saturn in this 10th house, we get someone who's very slow to change, or a late bloomer, or someone who is highly cautious, like a mountain goat. The native can also have a Saturnian reputation. Maybe you are known to be kind of harsh or cutting or serious or wealthy as well, or firm, or you have a mean streak reputation, or you are known to be pushy somehow. There can also be career challenges because, of course, we have a malefic in the 10th house of career. So, yes, there could be lots of challenges when it comes to your job, your career. For you, self-sustenance is a high value, quite likely, and you are basically the castle builder or the spiritual tiller. You are the gardener spiritually in some sense. And yes, you could be very concerned with your image or your social media image. So that's Saturn in the 10th house. Saturn in the 11th house can bring, because the 11th house is the house of groups, is the house of circles and networks. It can basically bring like a Debbie Downer. So watch out for that, perhaps. And Saturn in the 11th can bring themes in life where the give and take is very precise, and Saturn plays a very close and special role for you. Of course, go back to the part 1 of this series where I talk about Saturn the God, and you can kind of tie this into what that might mean for you specifically. And of course, look at the sign and anything else you have in the 11th house. But yes, the 10th house, by the way, is the house of kind of like the God, the arena of the gods, and kind of like the heavens in its most open, highest sense, and the judgments as well from the heavens. And the 11th house then is kind of what is coming after. So it's what is actually all the good. It's the house of good spirit, by the way, the 11th house. So all the good that is rained down on you from Saturn and other Saturn-like gods and that jazz. But yes, Saturn, I think for you, plays a very close and special role when it comes to your wishes and your dreams. So again, I would look into Saturn himself and Saturnian types and archetypes and how that connects to the things that you wish for and your dreams. Because this is the house of wishes granted and dreams attained. And with Saturn in the 11th house, you could have a few friends or a few allies. And it can also be hard to source support for your ambitions because we're putting a malefic in the 11th house. Friends could be wealthy or esteemed or mature. And someone with this Saturn in the 11th house placement could often expect the worst. So, similar to being a Debbie Downer, someone who worries a lot about how things are going to turn out. So, be careful of that as well, like bringing less good to yourself because of and I'm going to talk about this in my very soon upcoming video on Mercury in Cancer. Mercury is about to enter Cancer. We are in Cancer season right now. There is this kind of, on that Cancer Capricorn axis, this sort of avariciousness, this anxiety about the future, which can, when we kind of catastrophize things that aren't anything at all to worry about. It's like storms in teacups, mountains out of molehills. But because we attach that negative energy or expectation to a future outcome, it's like a bad foresight, and it does come back and actually hit us in a negative way. So I'd watch out for that. Like if you expect the worst often, try and look more at the positive expressions of Saturn. You could be also a serious networker or someone who's deeply vested in friendships. So basically a rock type of a friend. And here also we get wishes or dreams being cut short because Saturn is the scythe and it's a malefic. And so, yes, things can get cut short, especially early in life or kind of around the late 20s into the 30s, early 30s. There can be the sense of something being cut short, but there's always a lesson in that and a greener side and a silver lining, very nice silver pennies raining down from the heavens later. And the father also can be a very strong ally or a friend. The father can play a big role in the actualization of your dreams with Saturn in the 11th house. And finally, this type of person often has a plan B and a plan C. So, like, even if you do, or maybe because you do expect the worst outcome, you already have a plan B, plan C. And I think that's a very good expression often of Saturn in the 11th house. It's like having some sort of other plans or resources just in case what you dream of or wish for isn't quite going to come. All right, Saturn in the 12th house finally. This, by the way, is the joy of Saturn, the time lord, the lord of times, joy here. We have then people who very often with Saturn in the 12th house, or maybe not very often, maybe I'm being dramatic, but like could be exposed to spiritual possession because the 12th house is the house of bad spirit, things like curses. But Saturn also rules spiritual possession or being possessed. And yes, so we do have an accentuation here of curses or the bad spirit or elf shot and things like this. Also, more generally, perhaps Saturn in the 12th house brings someone who can maturely handle losses in life because the 12th house is associated with loss. And we're putting a malefic here. So maybe from an early stage in your life, even, you developed a maturity when it comes to losing people or things or yourself. And you are better at, as you grow up, better at handling future losses, or you're better at dealing with the theme of loss. Maybe you can even help people in some sense with loss. And getting like grievance counselor types could be really good here, or people who in some religious and or spiritual way help people with loss through the instrument of religion, spirituality. The father also can be lost with Saturn in the 12th house, or maybe the father is abroad or very far away. The father can also be a secret, or there's some secrecy surrounding the father, or maybe the father is ostracized or imprisoned or hospitalized or sick in some sense. And The father can also be some kind of 12th house person, so like a monk literally, or a monk like person, or someone who's very much closed book, or someone who likes to be on their own a lot, basically, or like camp in the woods a lot on their own, that kind of person. Now, Saturn in the 12th house can bring a lot of nightmares because Saturn rules things like nightmares, and we're putting it in the 12th house, which is the house of bad spirit. Sleep itself can be more restricted in some sense, and watch out for chronic Saturnian sickness. Things again pertaining to the joints or the skin, the teeth, the lungs, coughs, and the shins as well, and so on. The father, going back to the father, can also, with Saturn in the 12th house, be a hidden enemy or a hidden thing related to the father, or a hidden part of the father, side to the father, trips you up somehow in your life. Now, Saturn in the 12th house people can be very deep thinkers, very deep feelers as well. There could be a powerful melancholy or a power to your melancholy. And also, you could even be a dream interpreter. I mean, many 12th house placements will bring this, but you could be a dream interpreter, or someone who is able to flit in and out of dreams, nightmares, and be a sort of messenger or teacher of some sense, interpreter of some sense. Also, Saturn in the 12th house people can be mean spirited, and that might not be deliberate, but there could be many bad or unwanted energies attached to you, and that creates a mean spiritedness. You could also be a very mysterious person, or a very secretive person with Saturn in the 12th. You could be quite like a sacrificial type of person as well, or even kind of like overly giving to the serious detriment of yourself. So watch out for giving way too much. I think most people, like 99.99% of people, are not really in the position to be completely giving of themselves to every single person, but you might lean more to that, to the detriment of yourself. So protect yourself and your resources with Saturn in the 12th house, because yeah, you can go overboard in that realm. And finally, Saturn in the 12th house brings, I feel a lot of like poets, even if you're not literally a poet by career or profession or trade, it gives poetic types. Again, kind of going back to the melancholy, especially melancholic poets, or lyricists, but especially poets, writers, and it gives artists, a lot of artists, or again, like an artistic type of person. And songwriters as well can definitely be found with Saturn in the 12th house. And these can be things that you may wish if you're very young, or you're trying to find out which way to go, career wise, calling wise. You may well find that the poetic, artistic songwriter route is really suited to you, and really profits and benefits you moving forward and growing as a spiritual individual. All right, that's all I have for Saturn from the 6th to the 12th houses. Again, check out the first part of this series where I talk specifically about Saturn the God, in more detail. And yeah, see you in the next one. Leave me a comment. Let me know if this resonated for you at all, and how is your particular Saturn placement expressed. See ya. Love ya. Mwah.